is to tell the truth of what's really happening.
Exposing Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman brings you the inside scoop of what's happening at our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy and welcome to a brand new broadcast of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always, and we are glad to have you in the conversation. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, and you are listening to the American Family Radio Talk Network. Now I want to turn our attention, as we customarily do at the beginning of the program, to the Word of God. We're using a schedule that you can find at pray.afa.net, and we are in 1 John chapter 2. Now the focus of what the apostle is trying to communicate to us in this section of Scripture is to make us aware that there are people that are out there in our culture who are trying to deceive our brothers and sisters in Christ. They're trying to deceive us. They're trying to mislead us. They're trying to fool us about spiritual things and spiritual truths. And John wants to give us some pointers as to how we can spot these charlatans, these people that are deceivers and misleaders. And John says that there are 3 tests that you can apply. Now, this is a test we can use for our own Christian lives, but this is also the test that we can use to try to evaluate people that claim to be spiritual teachers, even claim to be Christian spiritual teachers. They may have television programs, they may have books, and we need to have some way of trying to assess whether they're the real thing or not, whether they're authentic or not. That's why John says in chapter 2, verse 26, that's the section we're in, chapter 2, he says, I write these things to you about those who are trying to deceive you. So he's specifically talking about spiritual leaders who are presenting themselves to us as sources of truth and sound teaching. Now, the first thing that John tells us is that there are 3 marks, or what John tells us in this book is there are 3 marks of the authentic Christian life. And the first one is obedience. He says in verse 3, by this we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commandments. Whoever says, I know him, but does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So somebody may say that he is a Christian, but if you look at his lifestyle, and he may even present himself to the public as a Christian leader and as a teacher, but if you see that in his life is out of conformity with the plain teaching of Scripture, you discover, for instance, that there is a pattern of adultery, or there is a pattern of financial misconduct, or you discover that there is a pattern of taking sexual advantage of staff members, you realize, look, this is not a guy that is keeping the commandments of God. Therefore, he's not living an authentic Christian life, and so we shouldn't be swayed by him, shouldn't be followers of him, shouldn't allow ourselves to be deceived by what he says. Now, the second mark of authentic Christian life, John says, is love. So he says in verses 9 through 11, whoever says he is in the light, again, somebody who confesses Christ, claims he's walking in the light of God, but he hates his brother, he is still in the darkness. Whoever loves his brother, on the other hand, verse 10, abides in the light, and in him there is no cause for stumbling. Whoever hates his brother is in the darkness and does not know where he is going. So the second mark of authentic Christian life is love, not just obedience, but also love. So if you look at someone who passes himself off as a spiritual leader, you ask yourself the question, does he treat everybody around him the same? Or does he ignore what he might be thinking of as the little people, ordinary people, people that don't matter in our culture, that aren't important in our culture, people that can't do something for him? Does he ignore them or give them short shrift in order to hang out with all the cool kids, hang out with the people of influence and prominence and preeminence? So the mark of an authentic Christian is that he treats everybody the same. He loves everybody, which means he treats them just the same. He doesn't treat some people better than others. You know, you see some people, when he knows he's being watched, he's all sugar and kindness and light. Then you see him when the camera's off him or people not paying attention, and he's barking at everybody around him and is kind of mean and surly. Well, that's not a guy that is walking in the light. Now, John in chapter 2, verse 16, a very familiar passage of Scripture, and I want to talk about this just for a second. He says, all that is in the world, he's still talking about how he recognizes those trying to fool us, all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh. What does he mean by desires of the flesh? These are impulses. The desires themselves are not the problem. It's what happens when we yield to these desires. So these are the temptations that are out there. The desires of the flesh are impulses that, if we yield to them, will lead us into behavior that is contrary to the will of God. So therefore, these impulses that arise from the flesh, that's from our physical body. In other words, we learn from what Paul says in Romans 5 through 8, that the sin principle, the power and the energy of sin is inside our physical bodies, and it works against us from within. So one of the things that the sin principle in our bodies will constantly produce are these impulses to do things that we know are out of the will of God. Then there are the desires of the eyes. These are the desire for something that we see, and we decide we just have to have it, but pursuing that thing, whether it is a woman, whether it is a boat, whether it is a house we can't afford, pursuing that thing will lead us into behavior that is contrary to the will of God. And then the last thing is the pride of life. That's a boastful pride in anything I have that makes me think, even to myself, that I am better than other people. That's the boastful pride of life. A pride that comes from comparing ourselves to others and feeling superior to them. It doesn't mean it's bad to have nice things, but the trick is to enjoy them and to thank God for them rather than using them as a source of pride. So that's something we must do when we look at the conduct of those who hold themselves out as spiritual leaders. If they're involved in extramarital affairs or other kind of sexual immorality, if they have lavish and extraordinarily ostentatious lifestyles, and they brag obnoxiously about what they have accomplished and what they own, they have yielded to the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes, and we should not allow ourselves to be deceived by what they say. Well, again, much of this applies to us, so let's go to prayer for ourselves as well. Lord Jesus, I pray this day for myself. I pray for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point, everyone right now within the sound of my voice, every man, woman, and child in this land, including our president, President Trump. And I pray that we will walk as you did, so that we may know that we have come to know you and may have the assurance of eternal life. Pray that we will obey your commands and your word, so that it may be evident that your love is truly made complete in us. I ask you to purge us from the love of the world and everything in the world. Free us from the cravings of sinful man, the lust of our eyes, and the boasting of what we have and do. May your anointing protect us from those who try to lead us astray by denying that you are the Christ. I pray that what we have heard from the beginning of our spiritual journey with you will remain in us, so that we may remain in you and in the Father. I pray these things in your name. Amen.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for a health care plan, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, Medi-Share members have shared more than $2.5 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with Medi-Share. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings may be less or more, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join Medi-Share anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Just hit *345. That's *345. *345.
Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. At the climax of the account, when Jesus restored Peter's personal relationship with him and Peter's call to ministry, he saw John following them. Jesus had just predicted that Peter would give his life for the gospel when Peter said, "What about John, Lord?" Jesus responded, "What does he have to do with your calling? You follow me." With those words, Jesus hit a consistent flaw of the human condition. We derive value and self-worth by comparing ourselves to other people. Your ups, your downs, your failures, your victories were never meant to be compared to other people. We have been called to serve an audience of one. The only approval you need is his.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher is my name. Focal Point program. The network is American Family Radio Network. I want to get into the hearings on Capitol Hill today, but before I do that, I want to take a moment just to mention one verse of Scripture and how it is constantly being verified by what we discover in the world. There is a very familiar passage, you're familiar, in Romans chapter 1, where Paul talks about sexual immorality, sexual misconduct. He talks about sexual immorality, and he talks about lesbianism and homosexuality and how these are contrary to nature and contrary to the will of God. But listen to what he says about sexual immorality. Therefore, God gave them up. This is Romans 1:24. God gave them up. He surrendered them over. In other words, God was kind of resisting what they wanted to do, fighting what they wanted to do, but eventually said, okay, they're so determined to fool around, they're so determined to pursue sexual indulgence, I'm just going to take my hands off and let them go. Let them have what they insist on having. So God gave them up. He surrendered. He yielded them up. He gave them over to their own desires and the power of their own impulses. God gave them up in the lusts or desires of their hearts to impurity. Listen to this, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Now, dishonoring can also have the idea of lowering in value, damaging our bodies. And here is kind of an alarming story. I'm just going to mention this and we'll move on, but I wanted you to be aware of this. The Bible, again, proved right in what it says. Don't doubt this book, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a story from the Daily Star in the United Kingdom about a new STD called Mycoplasma genitalium. It's known as MG. It's a kind of a brand new discovered STD, sexually transmitted disease, that makes women infertile. and they think that maybe 1 out of every 100 British adults between 18 and 44 are already thought to be infected with the bug, and they're warning that this figure will double in 10 years as it becomes untreatable. British Association of Sexual Health says that 3,000 women a year could lose their ability to have children. The spokesman for this organization says MG has the potential to become a superbug within a decade, resistant to standard antibiotics. Very difficult to treat, would put women who have it at increased risk of infertility. This was identified back in 1981. Not much was known about it until recently. It's commonly misdiagnosed as a different sexually transmitted disease. For most people, there are no symptoms. They don't even know they have it until it winds up being too late for them to stop it. So again, this is a warning from the British Association of Sexual Health. Probably don't even know anything about the Bible. Probably had no idea that Romans 1:26 was in the Bible. Ought to be a verse that they paste on the top of their clinics and all of their literature, since it's in line with what they have to say. So I wanted you to be aware of that, that the scriptures are verified every time that we turn around. Now, you're aware that what's going on this morning is this hearing on Capitol Hill, two House committees holding a hearing, a public hearing with Peter Strozk, who testified in private a week ago for 10 or 11 hours before these same two committees, but that was in the nature of a deposition, so we won't see the transcript from that appearance until the chairman of the committee believes that it's the right time to do that. He doesn't want to compromise or doesn't want to affect the testimony of others who may come before this committee. They could read the deposition and they could tailor their testimony to what they read in the deposition to make sure they line up. That's why you don't have witnesses. Witnesses are not allowed in a trial. I don't know if you know this. I found this out when I was given a subpoena to appear as a witness in a trial. I wasn't one of the plaintiffs or the defendants, but I was a witness, and I showed up in the courtroom, and this was when we were trying to protect the Ten Commandments monument in the city of Boise. I showed up in the courtroom. I'm sitting there because my friends are the ones that are kind of in the dock for what they had done to protect the Ten Commandments. And somebody from the city had taken us to court. Somebody from the city comes up and hands me a subpoena right in the courtroom before testimony starts and says I have to leave the room because nobody who is going to give testimony is allowed to be in the room while testimony is being given before it's their turn. Otherwise, they'll listen and they could tailor their own testimony to what they hear. So it's a very, very good rule. So I came in when it was my turn. I missed all of the earlier testimony, and I just told what I knew and just spoke the truth. I don't know how it lined up with what anybody else said. But that's the reason that these transcripts are not released until they're at a point, until the investigation is complete, where the release of the transcripts couldn't affect the sworn, remember, a deposition, sworn testimony, couldn't affect the sworn testimony of subsequent witnesses. Now, let's take a look. Would this be a good time, Jeff, to do the Goodlatte-Strozk exchange?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Robert Goodlatte is the chairman of this committee, so he's writing herd on these proceedings. And I am telling you, this was like what's the martial arts where they're inside the cage?
Mixed martial arts?
Yeah, this is like mixed martial arts, the way these guys were going at it. Everybody was yelling at each other. There was pandemonium in there. The chairman couldn't get control of anybody. Nobody was paying attention to him. Everybody was interrupting him with these out-of-order points of order. It was amazing to see these grown adults acting like 2-year-olds at daycare. Anyway, that's what happened this morning. And so Goodlatte's trying to get control of this thing. And in the meantime, he's also got some questions he wants to ask Peter Strozk. Here's just a minute of how their exchange went.
Mr. Strozk, are you objecting to the question? And if so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, two things. One, I do not believe I am here under subpoena. I believe I am here voluntarily. Second, I will not, based on direction of the FBI to me, Based on that, I will not answer that question because it goes to matters which are related to the ongoing investigations being undertaken by the Special Counsel
Mr. Strozk, you have not stated a valid legal basis for not responding to a question directed to you by a member of the United States House of Representatives. I am specifically directing you to answer the question in response to our subpoena, notwithstanding your objection.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strozk, please be advised that you can either comply with the committee's directive to answer the question or refuse to do so, the latter of which will place you at risk of a contempt citation and potential criminal liability.
Now, when you get a subpoena and you testify under oath, you have an obligation to answer the questions that are asked of you. And Strozk was kind of trying to dodge behind a kind of a bogus Fifth Amendment or confidentiality of counsel shield, and Goodlatte wasn't having anything to do with it. But Strozk continued to be stubborn, and so there, I think he's probably going to get a contempt of Congress citation. Eric Holder got one of those. Nothing happened to him, so I think Strozk figures, well, nothing is going to happen to me. Now, particularly what I wanted you to hear, and this will bleed over into the next segment, but Trey Gowdy was on the warpath today, if you'll forgive me for the racist analogy. Trey Gowdy went after Peter Strozk, I mean right at him, and he went at him hard, and I think basically in his 5 minutes of introductory comments, he said everything that you need to know about Peter Strozk and his involvement in these investigations. So here are some excerpts from Trey Gowdy's opening statement regarding Peter Strozk. Clip 1.
Agent Strozk, despite the plain language of his text and emails, despite the Inspector General's report, and despite common sense, doesn't think he was biased. He thinks calling someone destabilizing for the country isn't bias. He thinks promising to protect the country from someone he hasn't even begun to investigate isn't bias. He thinks promising to stop someone he is supposed to be fairly investigating from ever becoming president isn't bias. He thinks talking about an insurance policy to keep someone from becoming president isn't bias. That's for one of the folks he was investigating. He has a different set of rules for others that he's investigating. Agent Strozk thinks saying someone he is allegedly investigating should be elected president 100 million to 0.
And the way that soundbite ends, he doesn't think that's bias. So here what Gowdy's exposing is that Peter Strozk wants us to believe that even though before he'd even begun the interview of Hillary Clinton, or even before he started the investigation into her emails, before that had even started, before he knew anything, he said that she should be elected 100 million to none. He couldn't think of a single person in America that would be inclined to vote for Hillary Clinton, but he doesn't think that's any sort of bias. So anyway, Trey Gowdy goes on to explore a little bit more of Strozk's lack of bias. Clip 2.
Agent Strozk thinks pronouncing someone innocent before bothering to interview more than 30 different witnesses isn't bias. He thinks claiming you can smell the Trump supporters isn't bias, but he doesn't say a single solitary word about being able to smell the support of any other candidate. To him, that isn't bias. The moment Special Counsel Bob Mueller found out about Peter Strzok's text and emails, he kicked him off of the investigation. But that was a year and a half too late. The text and the emails may have been discovered in May of 2017, but the bias existed and was manifest a year and a half before that, all the way back to late 2015 and early 2016. So it wasn't the discovery of texts that got him fired. It was the bias manifest in those texts that made him unfit to objectively and dispassionately investigate. So if the bias existed in late 2015 and early 2016, and it did, his unfitness to investigate existed then as well.
So again, it says, Jesus said, everything that has been hidden will come to light. What is whispered in the closet will be shouted from the rooftops, and that's what Strozk and Lisa Page have been dealing with. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the implications of this testimony when we come back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. When I lived in Britain in the 70s, I was often stunned at how brainwashed the British were in terms of supporting socialized medicine, i.e. the National Health Service. Churchill called it the national sickness. When we lived there, people were going blind, waiting for operations that would have prevented their blindness. Where we lived in Oxford, the waiting time for a hernia operation was 6 years. Dr. Bill Frist, former senator and world-renowned heart transplant surgeon, was in charge of scheduling heart operations when he did an internship at a British hospital. He was allowed to schedule one operation a day. That's all the government would pay for. And he testified that not a week went by there wasn't at least one person on the waiting list who died waiting for a heart operation that they would have received in the United States. Now come new revelations that the National Health Service has covered up the unlawful killing of up to 650 patients at one English hospital. A sobering question must be asked. A government-run, not-for-profit hospital may well have a financial interest in eliminating, i.e., killing, costly patients. That has happened several times that we know of already in the British health system. The British socialized health system is not one we want to emulate in the United States. Whatever the problems may be, socialized medicine run by the government is not the answer. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio with Brian Fisher. The program is Focal Point, the home of ethanol-free radio, high-octane radio on your radio dial. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable as always. And AFR, American Family Radio, is the network. Again, we're running a little bit shorthanded today. We got Jeff doing two jobs because Rob, our other member of the team, is celebrating the birth of his second grandchild, a granddaughter, born yesterday morning. So he's enjoying that, and we are happy for him and excited for his family. So Jeff doing double duty this morning, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of wandering around in kind of a haze. But one way or another, we're getting on the air.
It's worth it, though. I mean, Rob just cheers up for like months after a grandbaby.
Man. You'd meet Rob, and he kind of looks a little bit like a biker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like what you would picture a biker to be with his facial hair and so forth. Looks like he could be kind of a gruff guy, a mean guy if he set out to be. He didn't have a mean bone in his body. It's just kind of a way he looks. But I'm telling you, that guy has got such a soft spot in his heart for his grandkids. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
He just melts when he even thinks about it. So he has one happy camper today. All right, let's go back to the hearing this morning. Peter Strozk on the hot seat, still going. Jim Jordan going after him right now. I see Raul Labrador sitting in front of him. He's my good friend from Idaho. He's congressman from Idaho. Anyway, Jim Jordan now boring in on Peter Strozk, and I would love to be able to listen in on what's going on with that. Maybe we'll have some sound from that tomorrow. But here's some more Trey Gowdy sound. This is clip number 3. Remember what Gowdy has been working on, the thesis that he has been developing is that Peter Strozk had a bias that was evident in his text messages clear back into 2015. his text exchanges with Lisa Page. Now, in some of the later testimony, he was trying to say, well, no, none of this bias bled into my official duties. It's like that was all sort of off-duty. That was in my personal space. That was in my personal world. That was in my personal time. But all of that was done on government phones. That's why they could retrieve these text messages. So it's simply not true that all of this was just being done on his own time. These texts were being sent back and forth during the workday. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, they managed to exchange 50,000 texts. I mean, I'm trying to think how many texts I've sent in my entire life. And they did this in a matter of, 6 months or something like that. It's just crazy. So they're just like texting fools all the time in between whatever work they're doing. They're wedging this in, and that's one FBI agent communicating with another FBI. You can't get any more non-personal time, non-work related than that. You know, and he says, well, we all had, everybody in the FBI has political opinions. Well, fine. But you're trying to say that it couldn't possibly have affected the work you did when the things that you were saying about Donald Trump, about his supporters. I mean, one of the texts, he said to Lisa Page, you go into a Walmart and you can smell the Trump support. That was Peter Strozk. Go into a Walmart and take a whiff. What you're smelling is Trump supporters. I mean, how elitist, condescending, and insulting is that? But oh no bias here, completely above the fray. Wouldn't let that touch affect anything that I would do. So anyway, Kurt Gowdy's not quite done with Peter Strozk. Clip number 3.
Agent Strozk struggled to define bias for the better part of 10 hours. For the rest of us, bias is the prejudging of a person, a group, or a thing. It usually has a negative connotation, but it is a preconceived position or a prejudgment. It is the making up of your mind ahead of time based on anything other than the facts, and that is exactly what he did. Bias is saying Hillary Clinton should win the presidency 100 million to 0 when she was still under investigation, wasn't even the nominee, hadn't been interviewed, and 30 other witnesses had also not been interviewed. In March of 2016, Agent Strozk had Clinton winning 100 million to 0, even though the investigation was far from being over. That is the prejudging of someone's innocence before all the evidence is in.
All right, that's bias, a textbook example of bias. Prejudging, read the definition right out of the dictionary. It's making a prejudgment about somebody's guilt or innocence before all the evidence is in. And Peter Strozk, as an FBI agent, remember, he was the lead investigator into Hillary Clinton's emails, and he started it. He's the one that drafted it up. So he was the lead investigator for Hillary Clinton, and then he was the lead investigator when they started the Trump-Mueller investigation. So this guy's not just a bystander. He's running both of these investigations. So it's no wonder that Hillary Clinton got a complete whitewash, got a complete pass, even though we know without any shadow of a doubt that she was guilty of numerous felonies in the way she mishandled confidential information. And Donald Trump, meanwhile, is hip deep, wrapped around the ankles by this Trump-Russia collusion investigation for which there is absolutely nothing. You know, we talked earlier about the effort on the part of Mueller to entangle Russians in this. He got 16 indictments against Russians. And the media was just agog. This is proof. This is the smoking gun. Mueller's got the goods on him. 16 indictments, and every one of them against a Russian. Now, it was low risk for Mueller because he doesn't think these people are ever going to show up. So he can beat the drums on how he's indicted 16 Russians. This is evidence that what we have suspected from the beginning is true, that Trump colluded with the Russians, collaborated with the Russians to try to defeat Hillary. Well, the Russians showed up. One of them hired a pretty high-priced, high-powered, effective law firm in the United States to represent their interests. They came into court and said, we're here, let the trial begin. We're going to insist on our right to a speedy trial. Speedy trial says you got to have, that trial's got to start within 70 days. Well, this is the last thing that Mueller wanted, the last thing that Mueller expected. He did not expect anybody from these Russian groups to show up. He thought he just had freewheeling opportunity to beat them up and imply their guilt and imply Trump's guilty connection to them, and he wouldn't have to expend any energy to do it. It was like a freebie. And when these Russians showed up, they said, we want a speedy trial. Well, the first thing, if you are the defendant, the prosecution, meaning Bob Mueller and his gang of assassins, the first thing is that they have to divulge to the defense everything that they've got on you, including all of the exculpatory evidence. And if they're found to be withholding any of that, that's big trouble for a prosecutor. You can get disbarred for that kind of stuff, and prosecutors can get disbarred like anybody else. And what happened is Mueller just folded his tent. He didn't expect this. He wasn't ready for this. He didn't want to provide discovery because what that would do would be it would reveal to everybody that he had nothing. Now, what Mueller has done, and this has gotten almost no attention for the simple reason that the fix is in with the media on this, but what Mueller did with this investigation into the Russians is he handed it off to a bunch of FBI prosecutors. So it's their baby now. So in other words, Trump is saying by the virtue of handing this thing off, these guys aren't a part of my Trump collusion Russian investigation anymore. I've got nothing on them. Otherwise, he would be the one carrying out the prosecution. He's not doing it. He's handed it off. So what will happen, you'll get these subsidiary prosecutors who will be responsible now to do whatever's going to be done with these 16 Russian groups and companies who have been indicted. One of those groups was not even in existence when the indictment was secured by Mueller. That's how much of a circus this thing is. One of those companies that he indicted did not even exist when Mueller was saying that they were guilty of all this nefarious conduct. So we know that that whole thing was a sham. And what will happen now, these lower-level investigators, and we'll try to keep an eye on this for you, but these lower-level investigators, they've got it now. It's been handed off to them by Mueller. And after a decent period of time, when they think everybody but Focal Point and the conservative media has forgotten about it, they'll just dismiss all the charges. They'll just drop them. Because remember, they're going to have to be engaged in discovery. If they go to trial on this deal, they're going to have to cough up everything that they have on these firms, which is bupkis. It's nothing. And so the sham will be exposed for what it is. Now, here is one last clip from Trey Gowdy, clip number 4.
On the other hand, he said Trump would be destabilizing, called him an idiot, abysmal, bigoted nonsense, called him a disaster, said he should F himself. Strozk promised to stop Trump from becoming president before the investigation even began. He talked longingly of Trump resigning 2 months after he was inaugurated and well before the special counsel investigation even began. Strozk even talked about impeachment the day special counsel was appointed. That is prejudging guilt, it is prejudging punishment, and it is textbook bias.
Textbook bias, and boy, he is right about that. So again, you know, his pledge to stop Donald Trump was a pledge that he made before the investigation had even begun. He talked about hoping that Trump would resign from office 2 months after Trump was inaugurated, before any investigations had begun. And he's talking about impeaching Trump the day the investigation begins. But he continues to insist and wants us to believe that there was no bias whatsoever. If you find that difficult to believe, I think you will have a whole lot of company. Focal Point, American Family Radio, glad to have you in the conversation. We'll be back with another round of content. Second hour, we'll take your calls at the beginning at the bottom of the hour, so stay with us. Got a lot of content to deliver between now and then. Looks like Trey Gowdy taking another swing at Peter Strozk. Love to be in that hearing and hear that. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is David Barton of Oil Builders Live, inviting you to join me here on American Family Radio this weekend. We take the ideas of the Founding Fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
The problem in our day is very similar to the problem in Elijah's day, if I might make that statement. It's not so much that we have rejected God, but that so many of us have made him such a small part of our lives. He's our Sunday God.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Someone Like You, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
In the book of Isaiah, the word tells us, "The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever." In the same way, without careful planning, your financial goals could blow away like the seeds of a dandelion. It's never too early or too late to consider how a charitable gift annuity can help you meet the financial goals you've set for your loved ones, your causes, and yourself. Give AFA Foundation a call at 800-326-4543, extension 345, or visit our website, afafoundation.net. Let us explain how a charitable gift annuity can help you achieve your goals. As we read in Proverbs, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. Our phone number again is 800-326-4543, extension 345, and our website is afafoundation.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point. We'll try to stay on top of what's developing with regard to Peter Strozk's testimony. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the network American Family Radio. And Trey Gowdy made the point that Peter Strozk had determined that Hillary was innocent long before he ever interviewed her. And remember, the interview, they didn't record it. They didn't even take detailed notes. There's no 302s from that interview with Hillary Clinton and Cheryl Mills, and I believe there was somebody else. It was Susan Rice, I believe, was allowed to sit in under the ruse that they were Hillary Clinton's attorneys and therefore could claim attorney-client privilege and refuse to talk about any discussions they'd had with their client. I mean, that's just a miscarriage of justice right there. It's unbelievable that kind of stuff happened. But Peter Strozk was a part of all of that. He was in the room when these two people were allowed to pass themselves off as Hillary Clinton's attorney. Peter Strozk knew that they weren't. They knew that nothing of the type, nothing like that at all was going on. So anyway, and Peter Strozk, Trey Gowdy reminded him, look, you determined that she was innocent and ought to be elected 100 million to 1, and there were 30 witnesses that you had not even talked to yet, and yet you want us to believe that there is no bias here. And what he tried to say about why he was fired, he said, no, I wasn't fired because of bias. I was fired because of the appearance of bias, because it just looked bad. Well, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. If there's bias there, it's going to look like bias. So if, in this case, bias appeared, it's because bias was present. It was just manifesting itself. It was just being uncovered. It was just being put on display It had been there the entire time since 2015. And, you know, we talked about this some. I'm going to get to Trump and NATO here in just a quick second, but we talked about this, about the fruit of the poisonous tree, and I saw a column. I didn't have a chance to read it, but by some legal beagle that was saying the same thing. We talked about this months ago. I saw this a couple of weeks ago, talking about this investigation being the fruit of the poison tree. And, you know, if you have, in a criminal trial, you have evidence that's been illegally obtained. You didn't have a search warrant. You went in, ransacked the guy's house, got all kinds of incriminating evidence against the guy. You can't use it because it was obtained by a illegal search. Everything that you obtained in the process of that search, everything it might have led to, you can't use. It's inadmissible as evidence. Well, this entire investigation that President Trump is wrapped up in right now with a seaweed wrapping around his neck, all of this never should have happened. I mean, the dossier was the basis of the investigation, the Mueller investigation into Trump. That became the basis of the FISA warrant to surveil President Trump. And that's all unverified. Even James Comey himself said it was an unverified, it was salacious, and it was unverified. And the FBI is prohibited by their own rules from applying for a warrant with anything other than verified information, verified data, hard and fast, solid legal information, the kind of information you can bring into court and have somebody take an oath and verify. Did not have that with the initial surveillance request. That means that everything that followed from that is inadmissible, which means the whole trial is inadmissible. There's no legal basis for this entire Mueller pursuit. It's just, as Donald Trump said, I just call it a snipe hunt because at least with a witch hunt, there might be a witch out there. Snipe hunt, there's no snipe out there. So it's just a ghost hunt is really what it is. All right. Now, Donald Trump, as you are aware, has been over meeting with the NATO troops, and he's kind of doing to NATO what Donald Trump did to Trey Gowdy. And realize on this NATO front, we have been carrying the freight for, and this is Donald Trump's point, carrying the freight for NATO virtually since it began. You know, it began shortly after World War II. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, where a bunch of North Atlantic nations, somehow Turkey got on this thing. I don't know how that happened. They do not belong in any kind of North Atlantic Treaty alliance. But anyway, the idea was that these nations would be banded together. They would be bonded together in a mutual defense pact. So if one member of NATO was attacked, then it would be considered an attack on every nation, and all the nations would come together to defend that one nation. Now, this is primarily for the nations in Europe who shared borders or border territory with the Soviet Union. Remember, this is back in the days of the communist Soviet Union. I mean, they were the bad guys, the evil empire. When Ronald Reagan said that, he was exactly right. So it was there to provide a mutual defense, and everybody, when they started this thing, well, they had a convention about what everybody's supposed to do to chip in, do their part. Everybody was supposed to spend 2% of their gross domestic product on defense. Now, there are 29 countries in NATO. You know how many countries of those 5 are actually coughing up 2% of their GDP to provide for defense? 5. 5 out of 29. The other 24 are coasting, riding on the backs of those 5 countries, including primarily the United States. We spend a little over 4% of our gross domestic product on defense. That's why they feel like we don't have to. We don't have to cough up 1%. We don't have to cough up 0.5%. We don't have to cough up 1.5%. We don't have to cough up 2% because the United States will bail us out. So they have been complacently assuming that the United States would just continue to carry the freight no matter what happened. The U.S. would be there and they didn't have to spend any money and we would come and bail them out. So that's why Donald Trump's a bit exercised with the NATO folks there because they aren't carrying their share of the load, a share that they pledged to carry. So here is Donald Trump at the NATO meeting yesterday, kind of starting to read them the riot act.
So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got it.
Now, this is something that most people don't know. There is a natural gas pipeline that runs from Russia directly to Germany. It doesn't go through any other NATO company. There are no extensions of this pipeline that go into any other NATO country. So this is a side deal between Russia and Germany, and the head of this pipeline company used to be the former chancellor of Germany. His name is Gerald Schroeder, and he's now a lobbyist or a representative of the Russian government doing a favor for his homies in Germany. So here is Germany. Remember, this is what is just sad about this deal. Germany has been running away from fossil fuels for, 10 or 15 years. They're trying to become completely dependent on solar and wind, and it's a disaster. The energy costs for the average German family going through the ceiling. There's no way solar and wind can provide but a small percentage of energy. So they're dependent on fossil fuels when the windmills aren't spinning and the sun isn't shining. They've got to have some backup source of energy. So the cost of electricity in Germany is completely through the ceiling. So now Germany is sliding back in without hoping anybody finds out into utter dependence upon fossil fuels. And they're depending on Russia to give them the fossil fuels. 70% of their natural gas is going to come from Russia. Now, what does that do? That makes them completely dependent upon Russia. Who are we trying to protect the NATO countries from? We're trying to protect them from Russia. So Trump has a valid complaint here. You know, we are spending billions of dollars to protect you, Germany, from Russia. Meanwhile, you are sending billions of dollars to Russia to pay them for this natural gas pipeline. And Trump says, is that appropriate? Absolutely not. Now, you're going to read a lot of bloviation from the media about Donald Trump and what he's doing over there in NATO and just how undiplomatic this is and how uncouth it is and how it lacks protocol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what it looks like, and this is what it sounds like to have somebody have an American president who stands up to the world for America. This is what it is. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. So you wonder why no president has ever done this before. They didn't have the guts to take the beating that Donald Trump is taking day in and day out. They still wanted the media to like them. They wanted the media to think that they were princes of peace among the leaders of the world, that they were deserving of accolades and awards for their leadership and their diplomacy and the quality of the way they related to the leaders of the world and their kindness and their gentleness and their lack of abrasiveness. Well, that's how you get so upside down on NATO agreement, where the United States is carrying not only its share of the load, but carrying the load for a good part of Europe. That's how you get there, with American presidents who mouth platitudes about American exceptionalism but do not confront the world. They'll complain about things like this, but they'll never do anything about it. Well, this is what it looks like to have an American president who takes on the rest of the world out of his pride for America. And I say, go, Donald, go. You know, when Donald Trump said, look, you go back and add up the amount that NATO owes that they didn't pay, didn't set aside for their military because we were there, it's a massive amount of money, billions and billions of dollars. Anyway, that's it for hour number one. We will be back after the news with hour number two. So don't go anywhere. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, this is Dr. Ronnie Floyd, President of the National Day of Prayer Task Force. The Apostle Paul wrote that we should pray without ceasing. Every day should be a day of prayer. As you pray today, would you please remember to pray for our nation and our leaders? We know God hears our prayers, and we pray He will continue to bless and heal our land. A reminder from American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
This is American Family News. I'm Steve Jordahl. FBI Special Agent Peter Strozk testified in a contentious and sometimes chaotic hearing before the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees on Thursday. Strozk is before the committee to discuss politically charged text messages between him and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page about then-candidate Donald Trump's election. Special Agent Strozk said he believes his private political discussions with Page are protected under the First Amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're mixing apples and oranges. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not familiar with that Supreme Court ruling. But based on what you said, protected categories, things like race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, are protected matters that we may not, the government and by law, people may not be discriminated against based on their role one way or the other in any one of those categories. That is entirely separate and distinct from political belief or political opinion. That, on the other hand, is encouraged, is protected by the First Amendment.
Strozk testified that he regrets sending anti-Trump text messages. Former FBI lawyer Lisa Page has agreed to appear on Capitol Hill Friday for testimony, despite defying a subpoena and choosing not to appear Wednesday as initially requested. President Trump will soon be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. There are a couple things he should remember, according to AFN's Chad Groening.
On Tuesday, President Trump refused to say whether he considers his Russian counterpart to be a friend or foe, but only that Putin is a competitor on the world stage. After a NATO meeting and a visit to the United Kingdom, Trump heads to Helsinki on July 16th to meet Putin. Before departing the White House for Europe, Trump told reporters, quote, "Frankly, Putin may be the easiest of them all." Frank Gaffney is president and CEO of the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. He says it is imperative that President Trump go into next week's summit with clear demands for Putin.
I think this isn't the time for just having a photo opportunity or backslapping. What Putin is up to is really a mortal threat to our country. I'm particularly, as an old Cold War guy, absolutely astounded by what Putin has been doing with respect to building up his nuclear forces for the purpose, quite frankly, of attacking us.
And Gaffney says for the most part we are ignoring it.
And I fear that President Trump might be inclined to do the same. He mustn't. I think that Putin needs to be called on the carpet for what he's doing that is going to endanger the lives of Americans, possibly millions of us, and to challenge it.
Gaffney says just as with North Korea, this kind of threat to the United States cannot be ignored or tolerated.
And I think that's a starting point for this conversation with Vladimir Putin.
I'm Chad Groening.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says Democrats in the House and Senate will continue to make their case to the American public that President Trump's Supreme Court nominee is not fit to be on the Supreme Court. Citing statements made by the president, Pelosi said Judge Brett Kavanaugh could reverse decades of law which protects a woman's so-called freedom of choice.
The president has said we will repeal Roe v. Wade. It will happen automatically. So we know what this is about. And it's a very dangerous prospect. So hopefully the American people will make their voices heard to the Senate.
Pelosi also criticized President Trump's threat to impose another $200 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports. A U.S. service member has been killed during a combat operation in Afghanistan.
U.S. officials tell Fox an American service member was killed in a joint combat operation with Afghan forces in eastern Afghanistan Thursday. It's the second American service member killed in action since Saturday. The Pentagon is withholding the slain service member's identity until next of kin notifications are complete. It's not immediately clear what caused the U.S. casualty. An Afghan soldier was also killed, and several were wounded, according to one official. 4 U.S. service members have been killed in action in Afghanistan this year, following 11 in 2017. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Find more news and information online. Our web address is onenewsnow.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and the One News Now mobile app. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hello and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Again, the two top items of the day have been the appearance of Peter Strozk before two committees on Congress, on the Hill before Congress, and his bias was exposed by Trey Gowdy for everybody to see. His defenses of his evident bias, that they were just personal and everybody's got them. And that was in my own personal time. Well, that wasn't true. It was during the workday. It was on government-owned devices, so you can't hide behind that. And it's just impossible to have that much bias and not have it affect the work you do. You know, you just put yourself in a place, whatever your job is, put yourself in a place where you have as much bile in your soul, in your heart, as Peter Strozk had for Trump. You have that much bile for the person that you're supposed to work for. There is no possible way it's not going to affect the quality of your service. There's just going to be a hitch in there somewhere. It's going to be a drag. Every time you want to do something you're supposed to do, you're going to have to overcome all of this internal resistance. No way it's not going to affect what you do. So Peter Strozk, very thin, claiming that he was fired not because of bias, but because of the appearance of bias. Well, if the bias is there, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like bias. I just think this is, and that bias had been there since 2015. The investigations didn't start till sometime in July of 2016. So that means the bias had been there for a year and a half. It had been festering, and it had been poisoning the well, and it had been tainting and corrupting Peter Strozk's soul, the guy that was heading up these investigations. All right. And then we have Donald Trump at NATO urging them to get with the program, pay their fair share. And as I mentioned, he's just being absolutely ripped by the media, as you can imagine. But as I pointed out, this is what it looks like for a president to go to bat for his country. And Donald Trump is doing that. And I say bully for him. This is what it looks like when a president of the United States, stands up for his country against the rest of the world. And the leaders that have come before him, everybody. I mean, President Obama went all over the world apologizing for America. He didn't stand up for America. He went around the world apologizing for America. And in contrast, Donald Trump is standing up for the country of which he is the president. And this is what it looks like. I mean, the presidents before Obama didn't stand up for America. I mean, I believe President Bush loved America with all of his heart. I believe that guy was as patriotic in his heart as you could get. But in terms of standing up to the world for America, he didn't always have what it took. He seemed to be compliant and kind of meek. This stuff was going on when George Bush was president. He didn't do anything about it. Donald Trump is the one that did. I don't mean to offend any of you out there that are big fans of George Bush. I myself am a fan of George Bush. I thought he did the right thing and did everything the right way in going into Iraq to neutralize Saddam and all of that. I thought he got a pretty raw deal toward the end of his term. But at any rate, Trump is doing what no president before him has done. That's stand up to the world on behalf of the United States. Now, Let's focus a little bit of attention on what's going on at the Supreme Court with the upcoming hearings. And there's one thing I want to make you aware of. You might read about this, start hearing about this in the media. So far, they haven't picked up on it, but I believe it's just a matter of time before they do and really hit this pretty hard. And it's some financial, I don't know if they're irregularities so much, but they do require an answer. Some unusual financial information or data regarding Brett Kavanaugh. Now, Brett Kavanaugh, the guy's got a net worth of less than $65,000. That's just total net worth. And so that's a guy, obviously, that has not been using his position to feather his own nest. I mean, Harry Reid making $174,000 a year for who knows how long, and all of a sudden you find out that the guy is worth $7 million. How did that happen? How does a guy who makes $174,000 a year, and that's all he does, that's his full-time job, he doesn't do anything else, how does a guy like that wind up with a net worth of $7 million? It's impossible unless there's something going on behind the scenes that is not good. Now, here's the deal with Brett Kavanaugh, and I think the media is going to go after him on this. I think they're going to worry him to death with this. There may be a perfectly plausible explanation for it. I sincerely hope that there is, and I'm hoping that we'll hear this plausible explanation from Brett Kavanaugh in the near future. But Brett Kavanaugh, and these are on government websites, so this information is publicly available to everybody. And going into 2017, and the research we've done around here indicates this is true since 2006, that Brett Kavanaugh has been carrying a personal debt load of somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 since 2006. And each year subsequent to that, that debt total remained about the same. Then suddenly in 2017, that vanished from his financial statement. He was all paid up, all of his debts were satisfied, all gone. Net worth hadn't changed. His net worth hadn't gone down. His net worth hadn't gone up. It remained the same. And yet that $200,000 debt, whatever it was, up to, could be less than that, could be well less than that, but up to that, had been completely liquidated, and there was no indication on his finance. In fact, there was nothing on the place in the form where you list gifts that have been given to you. You can always say, well, maybe somebody gave him the money to get out of debt. There's no mention of what gift that might be, and yet at the end of 2017, his financial form, no debt, all of it wiped completely clean. Now, the story that's coming out of the White House is, well, he incurred this debt buying season tickets to the Washington Nationals. But the problem with that is this debt goes back to before there even was a Washington Nationals. I don't know how long they've been around, but it goes back to like 2006. And the explanation for the debt being paid off is, well, he bought these season tickets for his friends, and they finally ponied up. They finally reimbursed him for the purchases that he made. Well, I will guarantee you that may well be true. But the media, I mean, the one thing that they will not let go of is any hint of financial scandal. They will be on that like white on rice. So I can guarantee you that they are going to be going after Brett Kavanaugh. And again, I hope and pray that there's a perfectly innocent explanation for this. But remember, Brett Kavanaugh was not on Donald Trump's initial list. There were 11 top-tier judges that were on Trump's initial list. Brett Kavanaugh was not on that list. That was the list that was produced in 2016. Then he wasn't on the list of the top 20. He didn't make the list until he got to the top 25, and it turns out that he didn't get on that list until 2018, which was after his debt had been liquidated. Now, again, the media can figure that out just like you and I can, and they're not going to be as kind toward Brett Kavanaugh as we are going to be, and as understanding and as patient and as willing to believe a good, credible explanation. To the media, and remember, we've already seen this, the story that they're baking out there is that Donald Trump went for Brett Kavanaugh because Brett Kavanaugh had written a paper where you cannot indict the sitting president. president. So the media is out there saying, well, this is why President Trump picked Brett Kavanaugh, because Brett Kavanaugh will have his back. If somebody tries to indict me, then Brett Kavanaugh, as a member of the Supreme Court, is going to have my back. So what the media is going to say, well, somebody in Trump's camp paid him off, paid his debt off, didn't tell anybody, no record of it, but paid the debt off so Kavanaugh would be cleared of any financial improprieties or problems so he could become Trump's nominee. And I'm not saying that's right at all. I'm just saying that's what the media is going to do with this story. Be right back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
As you hear this, I'm in Las Vegas at the Freedom Fest. I'll be giving 2 presentations and doing 1 book signing event. Thus, today is the live launch of my book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. I'll be speaking to more than 2,000 people about solutions to return to affordable free market medicine that puts the patient first and provides the kind of choices, affordability, and confidentiality only found in the free market. I'll include the book because it has specific action steps everyone, including you, can take to restore privacy and with it, freedom. Buy your copy of the book today at bigbrotherintheexamroom.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
What if I told you that you could clean your family's laundry and help reach the next generation at the same time? That opportunity is here through a company called Redeem Clean. Every time you use Redeem Clean products, you help support the ministry of the American Family Association. In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean laundry detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made in the USA. And they were developed exclusively for the support of the American Family Association. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and order Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio, and you are listening to the American Family Radio Network. I'm honored to welcome to our decision maker line Dr. Jim Hines. Dr. Hines is a candidate for the governor of Michigan. We had another candidate for the governorship, Patrick Kolbeck, on last week. And Dr. Hines has graciously accepted our invitation to come on and chat with us about his candidacy. Welcome, Dr. Hines, to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hey, it's great to be here. What a beautiful day. Yes, I'm running for governor on the Republican ticket, so it's great to talk to you.
Now, I guess there are 4 candidates on the Republican ticket. You are one of the 4. Patrick Kolbeck is another of the 4. Brian Calley, who has been the lieutenant governor of Michigan, is on the ballot, and Bill Schuett, who has been the Attorney General of Michigan, is on the ballot as well. Now, Dr. Hines, you have an interesting background. You don't really have a background in politics. In fact, I understand this is your first run for political office. So tell us what you were doing before. Give us a little bit of your bio and history, what you've been involved with up to this point in your life, and then walk us into what prompted you to make a run for public office.
I would be delighted to. I'm Dr. Jim Hines. I am an OBGYN doctor. I've been a medical doctor for 38 years and have delivered thousands of babies in the Saginaw area. And I'm a robotic surgeon, a laser surgeon, and I'm laser focused in this run for governor on jobs, education, and infrastructure. I am an outsider. I've not run for political office ever before. I see that as a strength, not a weakness. I have 30 years of private sector leadership experience. My wife and I worked in the Central African Republic as medical missionaries for 4 years, where I ran 2 hospitals and 20 urgent care facilities. And I've been a small business owner for 22 years. I'm the former chief of the medical staff of Covenant Healthcare, which is a large healthcare complex with over 500 doctors on staff. And then I'm the former president of the Christian Medical and Dental Association with 18,000 members. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-family, pro-small limited government. My wife and I have been married for 44 years here August 3rd, and have 7 sons and 16 grandchildren. So we're family people. And, the thing is, though, 5 of my sons have all 16 of our grandchildren in other states, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. I want to bring my family back and many other families back to the state of Michigan. I want to keep families here. I want to keep our college graduates here. And it's a little tough to convince them to come back when our roads are in the condition that they're in. Our auto insurance is the most expensive in America. And our kids, there's so many that are not reading. And so this is not family-friendly. And then, of course, we have toxic sites, over 7,000 toxic sites scattered throughout the state. And so my private sector experience with well drilling in Africa, taking care of the poor and needy there, and small business leadership here, I believe, prepares me well for what needs to be done in this state.
Well, let me probe you a little bit on some of those areas of emphasis, Dr. Hines. Talking here with Dr. Jim Hines, a candidate for governor in the state of Michigan. And I know, specifically referring to Detroit, and I don't want to say the entire state of Michigan is like Detroit at all. I'm not saying that. But I do know there are very severe problems with education and crime and tax rate in Detroit. People are leaving Detroit because the tax burden continues to go up and services continue to go down. They're leaving because the education system there is not getting the job done. I've looked at the statistics about the performance of students that are in Detroit public schools, and it's really pretty abysmal. Again, I'm not generalizing for the rest of the state. I'm sure that the rest of the state is doing a much better job. But obviously education, if you just look at Detroit itself, obviously education is a major issue. Obviously infrastructure, like you pointed out, is a major issue in the state of Michigan. And also the tax burden that people are carrying. A lot of people leaving some of these states that have been in Democratic hands, or cities been in Democratic hands for decades, and they're leaving because they just continue to jack up the tax rate. So
yes, it's absolutely true. And when we were younger kids, we read to our parents read to us. That's not happening so much, not only in Detroit but across America, across Michigan. And I believe that we need reading coaches in the classroom, grandpas and grandmas and moms and dads that will come in and read the kids one-on-one, one-on-two, and then we need a reading system that actually works, like phonics. And so those are a couple things that we need. I'm a strong supporter of school choice and local control. I think Common Core has been bad for the educational process, and would get rid of Common Core and let the local school districts decide what kind of curriculum they want, and then stick with it for a period of time and not change it so frequently. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing so many parents and kids leaving the traditional public school for charter schools, is because, they're just that one school just doesn't meet all the needs of so many kids. And so it's, when you think about it, our kids are the future of America, the future of Michigan, and frankly, too many of them are not reading, writing, or able to do math when they graduate from high school, and way too many are being pushed into college, being told, well, I know you don't know what you want to major in, but go to college and you'll figure it out. And that extends the cost of higher education and the length of time. And then, of course, kids drop out like crazy because, perhaps they should have gone into vocational trades and not been pushed into college. So this issue of jobs and education are intertwined. And I believe
Dr. Hines, let me just interject before we get on to the jobs thing and the economy deal. I just want to close the loop on the education deal. You mentioned you're a believer in school choice, a supporter of school choice. That's a conservative position. A lot of conservatives hold that view. But a lot of conservatives have a slightly different definition of what it means to be a supporter of school choice. So get as pragmatic as you possibly can, because there are a number of varieties of school choice. It could mean letting parents choose whatever public school they want to send their kid to. It could be providing continued support for charter schools. It could be providing a way for public financing to go to any school, including sectarian schools that are getting the education job done, providing some way to give a voucher so that parents can find other alternatives. So pragmatically, how would you support school choice in Michigan?
So I see this with my parents that have 2 and 3 children who have their kids in 2 or 3 different schools. Not one school often will meet the needs. And so parents, they love their kids. They want the best education for their kids. And so it's not uncommon to have a family where one child is in a charter school, another is in a traditional public school, and another is being homeschooled. And we've done all of those with our 7 sons, and including our 7th son, who's a special needs son. And the dollars follow the child. And so if a child and parent move from a traditional public school to a charter school, then those federal and state dollars move with that child. The voucher system you mentioned, it's gone to the ballot twice in Michigan. It didn't pass. If it passed, I would support it. But in Michigan, that's not the case. And so basically when I talk about school choice, I'm saying, pick the public school that works for your family and for your kids, even though you might have to drive 30 minutes or 45 minutes to get your child in just the right classroom to have your child excel.
All right, let's quickly, I didn't mean to interject, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about 2 more things. One is the job climate. You started to talk about that. What specifically would you do? What do you see as the main problem that's interfering with economic growth in Michigan, job growth, and what specifically would you do about that?
Good question. We have over 100,000 job openings in vocational trades. And so plumbers, electricians, etc. And we've been pushing our kids to college when they should have been given the opportunity to pursue an education in trade schools, and they weren't given that opportunity. So that's very important. And I think for the jobs, we have to keep taxes, regulations, and spending under control. And when we do that, when we decrease taxes whenever we can, that causes businesses to thrive and to grow and to add that extra employee or to expand or purchase that extra piece of equipment to get things done. I would foster entrepreneurship. I would encourage apprenticeships, internships, scholarships. I like the vocational trade program that's in our prison system, preparing current felons and prisoners for the skilled trades so that when they get out, they can provide a service for the community and an opportunity for them. These things are just so critically important, and all able-bodied people should be working or looking for work or getting an education so that they can provide for their families. And it's true that our unemployment rate is very low. It's low actually all across America. But I think the problem right now is we have job openings all across the state of Michigan, and we don't have qualified workers to take those jobs. And so we can't expect plumbers and electricians to come from other states. We need to grow our own. But to bring people into our state and to grow our population, to grow our state, we have to get auto insurance under control. We have to get our roads fixed. We have to protect our water. We have to provide a great education, because if you don't have those things, families are going to leave Michigan, and there are families that are not going to come back. So critically important.
Got one last question for you, Dr. Hines. We've only got about 45 seconds left. You talk about protecting the environment, and that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Throwing more money at it, believing we've got to stop climate change or global warming, that's a frontline battle. We got to stop global warming. Or it can just mean giving businesses incentive to maintain control of their environments. Where do you fall in that spectrum?
Well, we have 7,000 toxic sites that are not being addressed adequately here in the state, potentially leaching PFAS and other chemicals into our groundwater. So that needs to be addressed. We need to decommission Line 5, putting 23 million gallons of oil through a 65-year-old pipeline and figuring out how we can still have the oil, but decommission the line. We have invasive carp knocking on the door. I support green energy. I support free market energy. All these things are so important for our state, and I talk about this on my
Hines,
website, which is...
Okay, Dr. Hines, I am terribly sorry to interject, but I've got a hard break coming up here in about 7 seconds. Very sorry to have to let you go, but thank you for taking time to be with us.
Yes, you're welcome. HinesForMichigan.com, Hines, the number 4.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, I'm reading through the Old Testament now, and I'm coming to places that are named that I see on our Israel tour every March. It's really fascinating to think that Jericho existed way back in the Old Testament thousands of years ago, and I can visit there today. The same can be said for Jerusalem. The Bible literally comes to life when you visit Israel, the Holy Land. Now, we're going in March. My wife Allison and I, we lead these tours every March. So if you would like to go with us, you need to go to the website and check it out. It's twholyland.com, twholyland.com. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, just call us at 800-FAMILIES, option 5. That's 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and we'll send you a brochure.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Brian Fisher here. Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. I just finished my conversation with Dr. Jim Hines. Didn't give him time to adequately give you the website. If you want to get more information about his campaign, you can go to Hines, that's Hines, Hines 4, that's the number 4, Hines4Michigan.com. That is his website address. Okay, number to call if you want to join our conversation. We've talked about the hearings on Capitol Hill regarding the Peter Strozk and that whole circus. We've talked about Donald Trump before NATO, and this is what it sounds like when you have a president that sticks up for his country, which you have not had in the same way, certainly, for a really, really long time. And then we have also, talked here about the possible financial difficulties that Brett Kavanaugh may have. Again, he needs an explanation. We haven't heard it yet, other than the White House saying, well, all of his buddies that he bought these season tickets for paid him back. Well, it's a lot of season ticket money, and maybe that's the explanation. I'm going to be inclined to believe what we hear from Brett Kavanaugh. He seems to be a man of honor and all that kind of thing, but we do need to get that resolved, or the media is going to be all over that. So any of those topics that you'd like to weigh in on, you are welcome to do so. 888-589-8840 is the number. Let's grab soundbite number 6. Now, here we're starting to touch on the whole Supreme Court thing with Brett Kavanaugh and all that kind of thing. And here is Nada Bakos. She's a former CIA agent. You'll also hear from Kirsten Powers in a subsequent soundbite, as well as Scott Jennings. But this is not a Baco. She's a former CIA agent, and she reveals something here about how the left looks at American politics.
For instance, we have two branches of power, executive branch and Congress, who we were hoping would not act in their self-interest. That doesn't appear to be the case at this point. So we're still relying upon the Supreme Court to be able to do that. And that, is going to be determined by what happens when Kennedy retires.
So notice again, I don't know anything about Natabacos, but it seems to me, and she could believe something different, but it seems to me that what she is saying here is that the left is relying on the Supreme Court to do what we cannot get through the legislature. We can't get our stuff through Congress. We can't get stuff that we want through Congress. We don't have a president who will do our stuff, so we are still relying on the Supreme Court to do that. And my point is the left does look at the Supreme Court as if it is a super legislature, the final stop. You don't get what you want. You just go to the Supreme Court, and they'll give you, as a leftist, they'll give you exactly what you are looking for. Now, here's Scott Jennings. This is on CNN. Scott Jennings, who is a Republican, and he has a slightly different take on things. Let's listen.
I would just say that I have more confidence in the durability of American institutions. I mean, we have endured a lot in the 240-plus years since our founding. We've endured a lot of presidents, a lot of different kinds of personalities. And here's the thing. We have elections every 2 years. If you don't like what Donald Trump is doing, you can vote his party out in November, and then you can vote him out 2 years later. I think the alarm that people are sounding forgets that we have a chance as Americans to change the government or to keep the government in place, depending on your point of view. So I think it's a little alarmist to say everything is crumbling when we have not yet had an election since Donald Trump became the president.
And see, this is what conservatives believe, and this is what conservatives do. You know, we lost the presidential election in 2008. So what did we do? Did we try to go and get the Supreme Court to put our president in? No, we worked through the process, the democratic process, a political process that you pursue in a republic with a Republican form of government. We tried to get our people elected. We tried to make these changes at the ballot box. 2010, Tea Party surge. We took control of the House at the ballot box. We went through the Democratic, the Republican process, the Republic form of putting leadership in office through the ballot box, through votes. 2014, we took control of the Senate. How did we do it? We didn't get a ruling from the Supreme Court to do it. We did it the hard way by getting candidates and getting them voted into office in 2016. Same deal. We took control of the Oval Office, not because we got the Supreme Court to do something, but because we got people to turn out and vote. That's the way Republicans change the political structure, is at the ballot box. The left is too impatient for that. They don't want to wait for that to happen. They want the change to come the way they want it, when they want it, and they rely on the court system to get what they cannot get through the democratic system. Let's go to, this is clip number 8, Kirsten Powers, and then we'll go to your phone calls. Here's Kirsten Powers.
When things are starting to crumble, people literally say our institutions are too strong. They can, stand up against this. And the fact of the matter is the first institution that goes is the media. Mm-hmm. And that's the first institution that Donald Trump is trying to tear apart, and talks about the media being the enemy of the people, which is authoritarian speak, and has Republicans now parroting this, constantly about fake news and how you can't trust anybody in the media. It's literally like out of Vladimir Putin's playbook.
Out of Vladimir Putin's playbook. That's Kirsten Powers. And so she's saying when everything is falling apart, the first institution that goes is the media. Well, Donald Trump is not trying to put the media out of business. He's just disagreeing with them. He's just exposing them when they invent the news. That's all Donald Trump is doing. He's not trying to put the media out of business. He's not sending his goons out there to close down newspapers or shutter television stations or block radio stations. He's just disagreeing with the media. We haven't had a president in a long time who's fought back against the distortions of the talking snake media. They've had the field to themselves for 16 years. George Bush wouldn't push back. Well, before that, Bill Clinton, 8 years. They loved Bill Clinton. He didn't have any problem with anything they said or wrote. George Bush would never push back against these lies and distortions, didn't want to sully the presidency. Barack Obama, he was in the tank for the media. He loved everything they wrote about him. And so Donald Trump, for the first time since 1992, we've got somebody who's actually pushing back against the media, and that's what they just can't stand. They feel they're entitled and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's grab a call from Mary in Kansas. Welcome, Mary. Number to call, by the way, is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Mary, what's on your mind?
Well, first, I want to thank President Trump for taking all the abuse to try to protect us from the other people. But my question is, we have a judge on the Supreme Court that goes to sleep all the time, and so you know she doesn't hear everything. And we have a congressman woman that is trying to incite riots and getting people beat up. We've had people attacked in public because of her. Why can't Congress make them go through a mental testing to see if they are still capable mentally to even handle their jobs? I thank you for your service, and I'll hang up and let you talk to other people.
Okay, Mary, I appreciate that, and that is a concern for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She falls asleep in State of the Union addresses, gets drowsy on the bench, and obviously it's taxing on somebody her age to be doing what they do, and so people are concerned. Well, is she really locked into the oral arguments and so forth? Because they go right off in a room and vote after they hear oral arguments. That day they go in and vote. So then it's just a matter of assigning the majority opinion to somebody. And here's the reality, Mary. Everybody is accountable. Everybody's accountable to somebody, and it's in different ways. I think what we need with the Supreme Court, if we got an issue with a Supreme Court justice, impeachment is the solution. There isn't any other solution in the Constitution that's short of that's short of impeachment. So Supreme Court justices, they are accountable, and if the Congress doesn't have the courage to, I'm not saying this applies to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but if the Congress doesn't have the courage to impeach somebody that clearly has committed impeachable offenses, well, then that's on them. That's not on the structure. The Founding Fathers left us a good structure to hold everybody accountable. All right, Mary, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Mark in Alabama. Number again to call if you want to join our conversation is 888-589-8840. Mark, what's on your mind?
Brother Brian, how are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
How are you? Good. Permission to come aboard, sir.
Permission granted, sailor. Come on aboard.
I'm a first-time caller.
Great. Good to have you on.
And I was glad to hear that you backed off of Kavanaugh to oppose him till we heard everything about him. Because I wonder how many people, when President Trump was getting ready to appoint the Supreme Court nominee, I wonder how many people were praying for one specific person or was praying that God would apply the person to the position.
All right, so
what I'm saying?
Yeah, elaborate a little bit on your concerns there.
Well, I was just thinking, there were so many people praying for one specific person, and I was hoping that person would come too.
Yeah.
But I think that we needed to be praying for God to put into place the person that would best suit the position.
Yeah.
I believe that Trump's going to apply the other one. I was just a little concerned with the 7 months that she had. She didn't even have a year yet.
Yeah.
But I think she's going to make an excellent Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. Well, and our hopes are certainly right where yours are. We certainly hope that he's going to prove to be an outstanding justice, Mark, and we've got a lot of pro-life organizations are very confident that his pro-life credentials are impeccable. We have a lot of conservative legal organizations, I mean a bunch of them, the best ones in the country, and most of them are very enthusiastic about Brett Kavanaugh. So we're hoping and praying that he will turn out to be exactly what we hope He has a lot of things to like about Brett Kavanaugh. I don't want to be misunderstood here. There are a lot of things to like about Brett Kavanaugh, and I think the chances are good. We've got concerns, but we're not opposing him, and we're not opposing President Trump on this nomination. We just have concerns that have not yet been satisfied to our satisfaction, but we are hoping, and we hope they will by the time his judiciary hearings take place. But we hope and pray that Brett Kavanaugh is, in fact, just the man that God wants in that seat. Focal Point, American Family Radio, back with more of your calls and more content. Stay with us.
This is Tim Armstrong from the Worthy Walk radio program. I encourage you to listen as we work verse by verse through the scriptures each Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Central Time here on American Family Radio. Join me as we explore the Word of God and learn to apply its truths to our lives each day. The Worthy Walk radio program, Sundays at 9:30 a.m. Central Time on American Family Radio.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Netflix continues to ignore the outcry about 13 Reasons Why. The American Family Association, along with Parents Television Council and several other pro-family groups, have reached out to the streaming service urging the cancellation of their program. Netflix has not even responded to our letter. Instead, they released an even more vile Season 2 and are producing Season 3. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says their program is engaging and that it fosters discussion of taboo topics like suicide and sexual assault. But at what cost? 14-year-old Anna Bright and several other teens have committed suicide after watching the show. Hastings calls our objections propaganda. Does he feel the profitability of his company is worth more than the lives damaged or lost because of his show? Please sign our petition to Netflix, learn more, and share our action alert when you visit afa.net. And pray Reed Hastings will recognize the dangers of 13 Reasons Why.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call if you want to join the conversation is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And as I mentioned, the media is already on to this thing about Brett Kavanaugh and his finances. They want to know how that debt got paid off. A debt of up to $200,000 got somehow disappeared in 2017, and they want to know. And it sounds like they're skeptical. The story we're getting from the White House, and I've got no reason not to believe it, but that Brett Kavanaugh loved the Washington Nationals, splurged on season tickets, and his friends eventually reimbursed him for those tickets. And he stopped buying season tickets, and that's why it didn't reappear in 2018. So we are going to wait for more information on that. But as I predicted, the left has picked up on that. The media's picked up on this. And that's part of why I want to make you aware of it. Is when I saw these figures right away, I knew that the media is going to go after him like hyenas on this, because the one thing that they will hang on to, they'll sink their teeth into it. If they have even a whiff of a financial scandal or a financial problem, they are going to be all over that thing. So we'll see how that proceeds. We're going to get more information, obviously, as things unfold. So we'll keep you in the loop on that. All right, let's grab a call from Chuck in Mississippi. Chuck, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Chuck. Go right ahead. Got you 5 by 5.
I was thinking the reason President Trump chose Mr. Kavanaugh over Amy, whatever her name was he knew he couldn't get her through the Senate. Susan Collins already said, I'm not going to vote for her.
Uh-huh.
But Kavanaugh, he has a chance with Kavanaugh.
Yeah, and you may be right, Chuck. It might have been kind of a pragmatic decision. Kavanaugh definitely is more confirmable. Even Chuck Todd said that on his program as a left-leaning media person, that Kavanaugh is eminently confirmable. You know, and even Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who were sending really uncertain signals about Amy Coney Barrett, they're saying, look, they probably don't have a problem with Brett Kavanaugh. They're probably going to find a way to vote for him. So this is what Donald Trump apparently felt, that Brett Kavanaugh has enough of a, I'm not saying he's an establishment guy, but Donald Trump thinking, well, maybe this guy has enough of an establishment feel to him that people that normally have a knee-jerk reaction to pro-life justices are going to find a way to sign on to this guy. All right, Chuck, I think that's a valid suggestion worth considering. Let's grab a call from Rex in Texas. Rex, welcome. What's on your mind?
Oh, hello. Hey, I just wanted to tell you, I was in the first Desert Storm, and during Desert Storm, there were a lot of other things happening. You had Poised Hammer and Operation Rainbow Coalition, and there were a lot of other operations, and NATO was involved. I don't know why we pay for NATO. NATO was just terrible. If they had a paper bag over their head and you poured water on it, they drowned. They were. So I mean, it's like paying for kindergarten, you know, and we have and our guys are graduates from college. I don't understand what we're paying for anyway.
All right, so you're saying that they were just basically completely ineffective in terms of helping with the military objective.
I'm saying that if you told them to go to a point in the map, we'd actually have to go out and get them and bring them because they would get lost.
Wow.
And it was, and I was Navy. You know, I wasn't even a Army or a ground soldier. Yeah, it was that bad. They were terrible.
All right, Rex. Well, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. That's a useful piece of information to have from somebody that was boots on the ground in Desert Storm. Thank you, Rex. I appreciate that. Here is Shane. Shane, I believe you also want to weigh in on NATO. Let us know what you're thinking.
Yes. Hey, I agree with the previous caller, but I want to air some issues on, we're in, there's like 180 some countries in the world, and we're in over 170 of them, military forces and with our bases, and we're the only country in the world that does that.
Yeah.
And we're paying for the whole world, and I can't conceive why.
Yeah.
And for us to have that amount of money going out I want to say every day, it is just ludicrous, because we just need to bring our boys back home, our equipment back home, and set up a hot special mission group. And if somebody messes with us, we'll let hell rain down. And then we can bring our boys back and let them clean up the mess.
Well, Shane, I agree with you. I've talked about this before on the program. And Donald Trump, I believe, agrees with you as well, that he thinks that we're trying to do too much with our military. We're trying to be the policemen of the world. We can't do it. It's not our job. Donald Trump says, look, unless American interests are directly involved, I'm not going to deploy our military. That's where I'm at, and have been since the beginning.
I totally agree.
And I think
I wish. Go ahead.
Go finish your thought, Shane. Go ahead.
I wish the rest of the Americans would actually sit down and see how many of our boys we're putting in danger. Now, I'm a third-generation veteran, and my son is getting ready to go in the military, and I'm totally for military service. I think everybody in America should have military service, but it is an honor to serve this country.
And I think, Shane, what we want to do is we want to make sure that if we're going to put our young men and women in harm's way, we just have to be sure, in my view, that an American interest is at stake. We just can't send our military to some troubled place in the world just because there's trouble there. In fact, I don't even think we've got a right to intrude in the internal affairs of another country. I don't think we have the moral right to do that unless there is an American interest involved, unless they are tampering with or threatening American interests. Then we've got a right to send our military in there all we want. But my feeling, Shane, this is, I'll leave you with this. I'm hoping all America agrees with me. The purpose of the American military is not to make the world safe for democracy. The purpose of the United States military is to make the world safe for America and make the world safe for Americans. That's the purpose of the United States military. All right, let's go to Susan in Florida. Susan, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Yeah, I was watching the president beside his nominee the other night, introducing him.
Yes.
And I'm listening, and then I hear him say, well, you know, he's Roman Catholic. And I was listening, and I started thinking, well, I see a lot of doctrine, but he also said, I want to change the Constitution. It should be word. It shouldn't be altered. It shouldn't add anything to it.
Right. It should be applied as written. Go ahead.
Yeah, a strict construction.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I'm saying a strict construction is he's going to read those words and apply them. I personally believe some of the amendments were a mistake to our Constitution. That's how I think it should be pure. They fasted and prayed 3 days, I heard the other day, before they got it right when they wrote it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, see, more and more, my faith is just biblical. It's just based on every word, the inspired word of God through the prophets and the apostles. And I get real impatient with preachers and teachers, and I would be with a judge who brings things into it that just aren't there. And I know that the Catholic faith has a lot of added doctrine and dogma and rituals, and it makes decisions. I would look through the Bible for them, like what does Jesus or God say about birth control? I would look for that, and I couldn't find it. Or praying to Mary or a saint. When we know we go through Christ, there's only one way to God. And so I'm very concerned that my faith informs my mind, my actions. My heart informs my mind, my actions. So how can he strictly construct the Constitution when he has believed and is proud to say a Roman Catholic in a religious system that has all these added trappings to it? And
well, Susan, I appreciate the call, and I appreciate the the view that you're bringing. I think we also at the same time need to realize that the best jurists that we have on the Supreme Court are Roman Catholics. Antonin Scalia was a Roman Catholic. John Roberts is a Roman Catholic. Sam Alito is a Catholic. Justice Thomas has become a Catholic, or maybe he's Anglican. I'm not sure which. But Roman Catholics have made very fine jurists, and part of it is the Roman Catholic Church has an entire history of very logical thinking and an entire history of developing formulas for political affairs and so forth, so they know how to think through these political type issues very logically and thoroughly. And the reality is, and most of them know that they are on the court to interpret the Constitution and apply the Constitution, not to apply the Bible or not to apply the Roman Catholic view of things, but their job is to apply the Constitution. We know it was grounded on the Scriptures, that the founders consulted the Bible as the number one outside source they used to develop their worldview. We know that. We believe that. There was a Roman Catholic signer of the Declaration, a Roman Catholic signer of the Constitution, so they embraced, even as Roman Catholics, they embraced all of the content of the Constitution. So I think it's going to vary from one person to the next, but our experience has been that Roman Catholics have made very, very fine jurists. Some of the finest jurists we've had have come from that tradition. So I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. You know, and some of those other issues, those are issues I think make for good intramural discussion. We don't have time to wade into them right now, and that would be a topic for another day. Not that they're not worth talking about. Appreciate the call. Well, that's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast, may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.